Welcome again to Reclaiming Personal Empowerment session. On behalf of the San Diego Campus Violence Prevention Project Consortium, I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time and being with us today. During this session, we will explore how individuals recovering from sexual violence can empower themselves and find their inner strength. We will start our discussion with some survivors and thrivers within this space. But before we get to that, I would like to just repeat what our project coordinator has stated. Some little housekeeping items here is that please make sure your Zoom feature is on mute. The total time of this session will be an hour. That's correct, Nicole, an hour?
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half.
Yep.
Thank you very much. We kind of switched back and forth, but hour and a half. And with that, throughout the presentation, you will be muted. Maintain your mute status. If you have questions, please place them in the chat. And if given an opportunity, we will have those presented to our panel members at the end of the session. So with that, I would like to give you a little introduction about myself, and then I would ask our panel members to do the same. My name is Janene McIntyre, and I serve as the Director of the Office of Employee Relations in Title IX at Southwestern Community College District. I also serve as the co-lead of the San Diego Campus Violence Prevention Project Consortium, along with my co-lead, Marquise Jackson, that is also a member of the Southwestern Community College District. So with that, I would ask for our panelists if they could introduce themselves by quickly just providing their name, the organization they represent, and just a quick bio that really lets our guests know how this topic of discussion relates to them and their story from a personal or professional perspective. To get us started with that, I would like to ask Professor William Marsden if he can start us off and provide us a little intro into who he is.
Okay, I'm Bill Marsden. I've been an instructor at Southwestern College for almost 21 years. It'll be 21 years in September. I'm also adjunct at Grossmont College, and I teach 2 courses there. And let's see, I am the co-chair of PRISM, which is the LGBTQ plus affinity group at Southwestern College. I've also am the co-advisor for the Astra Jag Kitchen Club at Southwestern College. Any other? Oh.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Brenda, would you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brenda Airo-Dyer. I am a senior project clerk at the Jaguar Pathways office at Southwestern College. I've also been a student at Southwestern College. And this impacts, I am a survivor of sexual violence. So I'm really excited to be here. I hope that I can help someone here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Trina?
Hi, everyone. I greatly apologize. I was hoping to get my camera working, so I apologize, but I'm Trina Eros. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the basic needs coordinator at Southwestern College. Just a little bit about myself. You know, I have really been focused for the past 2 decades supporting folks with unmet basic and essential needs. I started originally working at local school districts and then moved on to more community-based work and helping neighborhoods that have, you know, faced cycles of poverty, trauma, or educational outcomes. So I'm very, I feel lucky to be part of this conversation today, as you know, I'm committed to helping support build resilience.
Thank you, Trina. And Raquel?
Hey everyone, just echoing Trina's acknowledgement of allowing us to be in this space with you all. My name is Raquel Funches, and I'm the Restorative Justice Project Specialist and co-advisor for the Rising Scholars Student Organization. And ultimately, the Restorative Justice Program supports our currently incarcerated students who are housed at our local prison, Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility, and our local county jail, East Mesa Reentry Facility. And additionally, we support our system impacted students on campus. And just for reference, system impacted generally refers to anyone who's been incarcerated themselves, who may have been arrested or convicted of a crime, but have not been incarcerated, and also those who have been directly impacted by a loved one's incarceration. I graduated now almost 4 years ago from SDSU with my master's in sociology, where I focused a lot of my research on restorative justice and higher education in prison. And most of my adult career, actually all of my adult career, has been working in the capacity of serving currently and formerly incarcerated students. So I feel privileged that Southwestern has a home for these particular students, and that we have the mission to continue our commitment of meeting students where they are, regardless of where they may be getting their education.
Thank you very much, Raquel. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank each and every one of our panelists, even before we start the discussion today. And in furtherance of starting the discussion, so everyone understands what we mean collectively, but also individually as panel members when we say personal empowerment. So with respect to that, Brenda, would you be so kind to let the group know, the guests know, what personal empowerment means to you?
It would help if I unmuted myself. Personal empowerment, it to me means that my sense of empowerment might be different from your sense of empowerment. I might get a sense of empowerment from being able to stand up for myself, which has been a problem in the past. Whereas somebody else might not see that as empowering to them, but in that it comes from within and not necessarily that I need it to be validated or given from somebody else.
Yeah, thank you. Trina, would you please let us know what personal empowerment means to you?
Sure. Well, for me, it speaks very much more to like the process of becoming powerful. So for myself, you know, I have gained or understood my own personal power through acknowledging, you know, my strengths and acknowledging, you know, my lived experiences and my lessons learned. That I guess, you know, it's almost like I've taught myself that I know what it takes to be able to make the choices for myself that are best for me. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Trina. Raquel?
Sure, and I want to highlight what Brenda said in mentioning that personal empowerment is just that, you know, it's what it means to us, and that there's no right or wrong way of, you know, defining what that means for you. But particularly for me, what I think of when I think of personal empowerment is just giving myself the permission to succeed and believing in myself. And a lot of that comes from, you know, being a woman of color and battling with moments of oppression, essentially, as I was growing up, and particularly in higher education. So most of my experiences, mostly in grad school, I would say, but especially in higher ed, I was always deemed, you know, aggressive or too strong-willed, challenging, just for offering my opinion or politely disagreeing with my faculty member or with my peers. So when I, you know, finally had a moment that, you know, a white peer of mine exuded very similar behaviors and was applauded essentially for her contributions, I think it was finally in that moment as an adult that I was like, okay, I now know that Black women, or for myself, I have to be extra careful with how my efforts are, particularly in the higher ed field. So again, allowing myself to be who I am, be seen for who I am unapologetically, and recognizing that personal empowerment is a process. It's ongoing. I definitely did not feel confident in my skills and my abilities, 5 years ago as I do now, but knowing that it is an ongoing process and just being proud of where I am today and the steps that I've overcome to be where I am in this journey, especially here in my employment.
Great. Thank you so much, Raquel. Bill, would you please let us know what personal empowerment means to you?
Well, in relation to sexual assault, my personal empowerment came about through, and I'm not going to say that I've arrived totally, but it came through forgiveness. And not only forgiveness of the person that assaulted me for several years, but also forgiveness for myself. And it does come from, like Brenda said, from within, and someone else also said that. It comes from within, it doesn't come from without, because I tried looking without, and I drank a lot, and I used drugs, and I also became a member of a cult for a while, because I thought the answers were out there, and all the answers are right here. They're right inside of you. And that's where you have to look. And so when I realized that, I finally got some power back. And I'm still, I'm still working on myself to this day. And I hope that everybody's working on themselves and trying to find that power within and empower themselves. So that's...
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill. So from your perspective, it's a journey.
It's a journey.
It's a journey. Thank you very much. So with that, before we really go into regaining or reclaiming it, we have two panelists that have been gracious in their willingness to be vulnerable, in hopes that someone perhaps that's part of this Zoom meeting will be encouraged and strengthened with whatever they're challenged with. We're recognizing that this April 2021 is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, but we can also appreciate that maybe it wasn't some form of sexual violence you were subjected to, but nevertheless, you're dealing with trying to define what your personal empowerment means and how to go about reclaiming it. So with that, like I said, two of our panelists have been willing to share their story. Please know, and I ask everyone to be patient as they do so. This is very hard, as anyone can imagine, to really put yourself out there and expose yourself in such a way. We have told them in advance that if it becomes too challenging, to feel free to turn off their camera and have that space. If they need to end the discussion at a certain point, to feel free to do so, to let us know, and we will respect that. So with that being said, Brenda, thanks again for your willingness to do this. If you could share with us, as you see fit, some of your experience in the space and being subjected to sexual violence, but also how the process you have taken to reclaim your personal empowerment.
Okay, thank you for having me here. I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
Could everyone make sure their mute is on, the speakers as well, and then unmute once we actually direct a question to you? Maybe that will help with the feedback.
Thank you. When I was little, my mom remarried, and my father was an alcoholic, and her second husband was a child molester. And not that he could have been one before he got there, but he definitely was one after. My mother went back to night school, and when she was gone, he would molest us. Well, at first I didn't know, I thought it was just me. And there were you know, Bill talked about forgiveness. I've had to forgive my mother, and not that I made any excuses for her. I didn't make any excuses for her. I just had to forgive her because there were signs that something was happening. I mean, okay, not even signs, blatant. For instance, he would French kiss us in front of my mother. When we went bra shopping, when we came home, we'd have to model our bras to make sure they fit okay. You know, she should have seen, if that wasn't bad enough, there were times where I was so desperate for her to protect me that I would block the front door with my body and beg her not to go to school. And she went anyway. And, you know, when this started happening, I started doing badly in school. And what would happen is I would get caught. I'd have to stay after school for an hour. And just as I would be coming home, my stepfather would be coming home from work. And sometimes I'd be able to beat him home so he wouldn't know that I had been held after school. Sometimes I didn't. And so I was getting in trouble a lot. I was being put on restriction. And then what would happen when my mother would go to school, he would molest me, and then all of a sudden I wasn't in trouble anymore. If I was told that I couldn't have dessert, all of a sudden I could have dessert. If I was told that I had to stay in my room on my bed, then all of a sudden I could go watch TV. And while I definitely didn't like what was happening, what I realized is that, oh, wait a minute, if I let him do this, then I get to do what I want. So what I learned was that my body and sex, I could use to manipulate and get what I wanted. And that was a message that I carried into adulthood and well into adulthood. I did that. I left home when I was 15 because I finally had a talk with my older sister, and I had found out that what was happening to me had happened to her when we're all 2 years apart. So it started happening to her, and then it stopped with her and started with me. And I had a little sister, and it was going to be her turn next. And it was just about that time where I guess he likes 12-year-olds, that he was going to start with her. And so I told my mom what was happening, and they went into the backyard and talked for, in my memory, it was like 45 minutes. And they came back in and called me out into the living room and said, what he did was wrong, and what you've been doing was wrong, meaning getting in trouble at school and bad grades and stuff. And so I had been put on restriction for the whole summer. I was told I was off restriction and that we hoped that I could forgive and forget. And what it did was reinforce the message that I could get out of trouble if I let somebody take advantage of me, and made it clear that there was no protection there at home. I told them that I could forgive, but I could never forget, and they seemed to be okay with that. And we were like, life went back to normal. From my perspective, it went back to normal, and I couldn't handle it. I left home at 15 and continued that that manipulation, using my body to manipulate, and especially men were easily manipulated. I did it to have a place to sleep because I didn't have anywhere to go. I used sex for food. I started drinking and using too, and I used sex for that too. I was young and cute, and it was really easy for me. And things spiraled. Although I knew that I could get what I wanted from using that, it also took a piece of my soul every time. And even though I didn't realize it then, I see it now. And so the more I did that, the more I drank and used to not feel the emptiness. And it finally got to, everything got so out of control that I lost everything. I had a family, I had a home, and I lost everything. And it was only through absolutely losing everything that I started to get some of myself back. I got clean and sober, and I've only been able to forgive through I've gone to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've been clean and sober for 25 years. And through working the steps, working with a sponsor, I've been able to implement that program in every area of my life, including the sexual abuse that happened. And it's only because of that I've been able to have that really unconditional forgiveness of my mother, and not let it have any power over me anymore. I've learned how to let my body is mine, and it's not something to be used by them or me. It's just it's safe now. It's safe now to have sex, and I get to choose who that is and when I want it, without feeling like I need to apologize to somebody for not wanting it. Going back to school and getting a degree, and I started at Southwestern as a student and got a degree in something that I'm not doing now, but it's like Bill said, it's a journey, right? I don't know where exactly I'm going to end up, but here I am. I wish that there would have been more things like this happening, so that I could have been aware that there was help, that somebody to tell me that I didn't have to live like I was living, to even know that there was something different available. I didn't ever hear any of that. I can see now, looking back, when I moved out when I was 15, I moved in with a 25-year-old. And when I think of my kids at 15 living with a 25-year-old, there's no way I would have let that happen. There's just no way. But I was allowed to. And, the difference between being used at home and being used outside of home was that, at least outside of home, I had a choice of who it was that was going to use me and when, or when I was going to use myself. that in some way I was taking back a little bit of control by leaving the home and saying, well, you know, I'm still going to be having sex with people, but at least it's going to be my choice. And I thought that was taking back power. It wasn't taking back power, but it's taken what it's taken for me to get here. And I'm glad that I'm here today.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Your willingness to be vulnerable and share with us. You said, and this is sticking out to me, you said the process that you went through and thinking that you had the control once you were outside of your mom's home, that was taking back power. If that was not taking back power as you define it, could you remind us of what you said earlier about how you define reclaiming that personal empowerment now?
So in a way, it was taking back power, right? I was regaining the choice for myself. The power now is that that I'm not a commodity to be used or spent. That now I have a worth that's great, much higher than what my body is. That the worth now comes from within, and doesn't have anything to do with my body.
Wow, thank you. So it's how you see yourself, the value that you place on your own life. Thank you so much for that, Brenda. And as you can see in the chat, perhaps several others are thanking you for your vulnerability and your courage. Bill, if you could share with us a little bit of your journey and your role, as you said, it's still a process, but if you could just give us a little insight on some of the things that you've endured and what's brought you to the place where you are now in your journey.
Thank you. I really cherish the opportunity to share. I hope I helped somebody today. I really do. When this all started, I was 6 years old. You know, I always told my therapist I was 7, but I looked for the date when The Creature from the Black Lagoon came out, and that came out in the year I was 6 years old. And that was one of the movies the perpetrator took me to the same night the same day that he first molested me. I was 6 years old. My family were friends with a family that they went through the Great Depression with. And the two families depended upon each other. They were kind of like in a community all together in LA, where they all helped each other during the time of the Depression. And so they became really good friends, my parents and this couple and their children. And I was 6 years old, and the perpetrator was around 16 at that time. And I was in his room, and he put me on the bed and he started to fondle me. And he, of course, wanted me to fondle him. And so it started there. And then he told me that if I ever told my parents, I'd be in terrible trouble and that I would probably go to jail at 6 years of age. I mean, he really gave me some frightening stories. And then that same night, his parents asked him to take me to the movies. And we went to see The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I still remember it. And then I had to go to the bathroom, and he went with me. And then it happened again in the bathroom in the movie theater. And to make a long story short about the molestation, over the several years that our families visited each other, we either went there to Pomona, to his family's home, or they came to us in San Diego. Every time there was an incident. And the code word was darling. Let's play darling. And here I was, 6 years old. I had no idea what darling meant even. So anyway, this went on for till the time I was around 13 years of age. And he came to visit our home in Paradise Hills. And he was in the Navy at the time, and he was being put through medical school by the Navy. And he did become a doctor. And he came to our home, and of course, my mom put him in my room to spend the night. And I told him, because I was big enough now, I said, under no certain circumstances were you going to touch me, or I'm going to hit you. And I made it well known that I meant what I was going to do. And he spent the night on the floor in a sleeping bag, and I stayed in my bed, and I was, had a hard time sleeping that night, I can remember. But that was the end of it, and I was about 13. So we have about a 7-year span of this. But during that time, I forgot to mention I had to forgive my parents as well. Even though I never told them anything, I had all the signs. When I became, after the molestation, I started, well, first of all, my sister caught me outside, and I was trying to kill birds in a bird nest. And then when we went up to their house in Pomona, the perpetrator's house, they had this beautiful garden with a fish pond, and inside a shed, there was a big aquarium with fish. And I found some bug spray, and I started spraying the fish with the bug spray, and I got caught. And I got yelled at, and people, oh, is your child crazy? Oh, he's so crazy. And, my sister even said, Billy, you're crazy because you're trying to kill animals. And I felt some more shame, of course. And during that year, I also became incapretic, becoming a marriage and family therapist later, I found is a common red flag with particularly boys who have been molested. They sometimes become incapretic, and even though they're potty trained. And that happened up until the time I was almost 8 years old. And the thing was, I was kind of a pretty boy. You wouldn't know it now. I was a real pretty boy. And what I did was I started putting on lots of weight. And that's another defense mechanism. And I would, eat and eat. I can remember eating like 4 hamburgers in one sitting just to, I don't know. All the red flags were there, but my parents, unfortunately, weren't educated enough to understand what was going on. And when I finally spoke about my molest, I was almost 40 years old, and I had what most people would call a nervous breakdown in my late 30s. And here I was a director, a Head Start director at that time. And I just lost all control. And I went to San Luis Rey Hospital in up the coast. And I was there for a month. And during that time was the first time I finally admitted to other adults what had happened to me. I really lost it the first time. In fact, the group that I lost it with told me I scared them because I actually started reliving the whole thing. I relived every molestation that happened, I think. And I even yelled and screamed. And so what happened from there was I finally told my brother who passed away about 3 years ago, But I told him, and he says, "Oh, was it just fondling?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I can't even tell my own family members what happened because they're going to minimize it. Because it became more than just fondling as the years went on." Okay. So that was the last time I admitted it to a family member. I never told my parents, and I was afraid to hurt anybody. But the thing that bothers me the most, or bothered me the most, was I found out when they finally did a report from San Luis Rey Hospital, I found out that he had been a very successful doctor in the San Francisco area, working for Kaiser Permanente. And I just wondered to myself, how many children did he have access to on all those years? And it was one of the things I had to forgive myself for. He has recently passed away. He's gone. He had 2 daughters I know of. That's all I know about him. But yeah, that's my story. And I'm keeping it together this time. I'm proud of myself.
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Bill. Thank you so very much again for your courage, your willingness to speak before us in hopes that someone can be helped through this.
Uh-huh.
Your story. I know you talked about suppressing it for so long.
Oh, yeah.
And, eventually finding yourself in a hospital to deal with that. Can you share with us a little bit of that process from, really realizing, the steps that you went through, realizing that you no longer could suppress this, and then by sharing, what did that do for you?
Okay, I had 2 children of my own. Incidentally, I want to say something here. The reason why I hesitated sharing this is because I do identify as bisexual, and I don't want anybody to think that's the reason I'm bisexual, because I knew before the age of 6, before I was molested, that I had crushes on men and women. I knew that, and I can still remember that. So I just wanted to put that out there before I go on. But what happened was I had 2 children of my own, and I was losing it. I was holding it together. I was a functional alcoholic, and I would have to say alcoholic and meth addict at the time. And on weekends, I would just drink up a storm and I would do meth. And I finally said, "Oh no, I can't do this." And I've got these children, and I'm working for Head Start, and I will have to say, I was working for Neighborhood House at the time, and they were so gracious in letting me go to the hospital. I said, "You know what, I've got a problem," and they gave me the leave time to go. And I was so fortunate to have medical insurance too, to cover it. But yeah, I think it was my own children, having my own children. And one of them already had special needs. And I realized, you know what, I can't do this anymore. So yeah, I kind of lost control. Some people would say it was functional. I was a functional alcoholic and addict, but nobody's really functional.
Right.
Yeah, you're just suppressing stuff, and it's going to come out sooner or later, and it's going to come out in other ways, diseases or whatever,
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill, for that. And I know when we first spoke with Brenda, like yourself, she said the same about her children as what really became the fight, because where she was at that stage in her life, she didn't value herself enough to fight for herself, but she did fight for her children. And it sounds like that was a similar fight that was established in you for your children.
Very similar, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And share with someone something else you said, Bill, that I want to just really focus on a little bit. Things like this is very common for the victim to blame themselves. And then having to maintain the secret of this and the shame that can come with it. So if anyone as part of this presentation is going through this in your quiet spaces, you've suppressed this. The best thing you can do for yourself is to release, remove. This is not your shame, not your fault. This is the perpetrator's fault. This has nothing to do with you. And the best way that you start on your journey, like Brenda and Bill, is to speak your truth and share it to someone in a confidential setting that's going to protect and respect your space. So I want to say that right now, because I think that's very important. In your stories, both of you at different times blame yourself and were swallowing the shame that you endured. And that's
May I say something here?
Yeah.
And there's also the guilt, because not all of it felt bad. And there's the guilt of the times that it felt good. And you carry that with you too. And you have to, again, forgive yourself, because it wasn't your fault. You're right. It isn't your fault. It's the person that's doing it. It has to do with them. And who knows? I always wondered, was my perpetrator molested as well? You know, I always wondered, how did he learn that behavior? So.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bella. Appreciate you and Brenda both. Now with that, as we said, reclaiming personal empowerment. That's the title of this session. We've heard from two courageous colleagues, friends here today, but we also have a couple of individuals on the panel that really here to provide all of us with more information on the services that may be needed. Brenda shared with us about how she had to seek refuge when she left her mother's home somewhere. So in that, not realizing maybe other resources that were available to her, she turned to situations that really perpetuated her lack of safety, even though she didn't realize it at the time. So with that, Trina, if you could share, having heard Brenda and Bill's story that are so representative of so many stories, if you can share with these type of services that your organization can provide, and maybe other community-based organizations that can provide someone in this situation.
Sure. So I'll speak specifically first to the basic needs program here at Southwestern, and how we can provide some resources that can increase someone's safety, right? So I meet with students individually, and I'm an access point for resources. So speaking about housing, you know, students can come to me and I can connect them with whether it be a domestic violence shelter, rental assistance, so they can get affordable housing for their own, right? If they want a housing solution to maybe move away from the perpetrator. We have also, in regards to, I think of technology and transportation as important things for safety, right? To be able to access resources, to be able to access emergency care. So we, for instance, can provide like Uber gift cards or transportation support funds for bus passes, Wi-Fi, affordable cell phones. All of those types of resources can be accessed through basic needs, as well as just benefits for food, wanting to make sure that folks can meet their daily nutrition, right, to just face everyday living. And we offer gift cards, you know, I would encourage anyone to reach out to their basic needs supports. If you're not a Southwestern student, you know, there's other community colleges and universities that have an office, the basic needs office. The County of San Diego also has what they call family resource centers, which is a safe space for folks to go in and say, you know, I need housing, I need food, I need daycare, you know, just whatever it is, and they are able to connect folks to resources similarly to what I do with students individually as well. And there's also, you know, for those who may feel uncomfortable going anywhere in person, you know, they can also just call 211, which is a community service resource line. And you can just call 211 and share your current situation, and they can assess and connect to resources as well.
Oh, that's great, Trina. Thank you so very much. So many resources that are available. And as Brenda had mentioned in sharing her story, there's a lot of things that she wished she would have known. So there again, if you find yourself in the need, or you know someone that's in need, the best thing that you can do is provide them with the support and let them know that there are resources with respect to a lot of the things that Trina spoke of and other things as well. And for that, I would really like for Raquel at this point to kind of bring her perspective and her expertise from the area in which she works to this discussion. Raquel?
Definitely. And first, I just want to commend, you know, both of our survivors here for sharing their story, because it's definitely not easy, especially with a crowd of, I guess, potentially strangers. But so just thank you for that. And just also prefacing that, you know, I'm no expert in the field of sexual violence. Most of my knowledge comes from the field of restorative justice, which is what I will touch upon a lot. And I think that's really important to show that there's alternatives to our traditional court process with getting justice for survivors. And in speaking of that, I think we alluded to it a bit earlier, that when we think about justice in reference to sexual violence, we want to also be very careful with how we're labeling or using the terminology to speak about folks, survivors specifically of sexual violence. Because, you know, Bill talked about it briefly, that, you know, society tends to devalue someone when they are labeled as a victim. And particularly, you know, research shows that males in particular don't receive the same courtesy than female survivors. So using the term survivor is quite empowering, and it helps those folks reestablish that sense of control and agency as they're moving through that process. So, you know, I know what restorative justice may be, but to give everyone a little understanding of what that may be, in particular to the adjudication process, it's more of a community-based justice process focused on repairing harm and working toward restoring the restoration of those who are impacted by a crime. So we know our traditional system is very punitive and adversarial, but restorative justice is used as an approach to emphasize healing in survivors, accountability for perpetrators, and also the inclusion of support networks in creating such a healthier or safer outcome or community. And the goal essentially of restorative justice used as a holistic process in the adjudication is to reach meaningful and fair outcomes through inclusion, open communication, and honesty. So recognizing what restorative justice may mean, I feel like the core commitments or core principles of restorative justice are acknowledgement of the wrongdoing, accountability on the perpetrator's behalf and taking responsibility for what took place, repairing the harm done, and making sure that the offense isn't recommitted on other folks within the community. And again, a lot of these, what I'm referring to, I guess, are more of adult survivors. I feel like once we talk about childhood or child survivors, it gets a little bit more tricky and a little bit more, more parties are involved when it comes to that. So I just want to preface that as well, that most of what I'm talking about is reference into adult survivors. So now that we kind of have an idea of what restorative justice is, you know, how can that bring solutions to situations of sexual violence? And one, we all know that the criminal justice system traditionally deals with sexual assault cases very poorly. Tens of thousands of untested rape kits, fewer than 5% of cases result in conviction or even, lack of reporting, so to speak. And in some states, we still have a lot of inconsistency with what constitutes sexual violence. So oftentimes we're excluding the LGBTQ+ folks from being legally protected. And we also see this happening very frequently in churches, college and universities, and within the military industrial complex, where it goes virtually unnoticed or unreported. So this process of utilizing restorative justice is much more flexible, and the goals are to actually achieve a sense of justice for survivors and for perpetrators to take responsibility for their actions. So since we know that less than 5% of cases are actually brought forward or to conviction, that means that there's so many other survivors out there that are not receiving justice. And in saying that also, justice may not always mean criminal punishment. There are many survivors who express the use of restorative justice to just provide that sense of a healing process and just having more of, I guess, a restorative punishment. So it doesn't require, that level of punishment. And I learned a lot, not to put you on the spot, Janene, but in your presentation, I think earlier this year, and talking about, it's not always about wanting to punish those folks who are, committing these offenses, depending on the severity. And also knowing that prisons, and with my experience in working with folks who are incarcerated, in my opinion, are quite arguably the most traumatizing institutions. So putting someone within those facilities may cause further harm and may not always be the best way to hold people accountable. So in talking about restorative justice and sexual violence, how can we then hold folks accountable for their wrongdoing, but also allow survivors to achieve justice? And so within restorative justice options, there are many practices, so to speak, such as peacemaking circles, which is a less formal approach that gives people, and this is in a range, and I would say peacemaking circles is probably the best form of achieving said justice for more childhood survivors of trauma and sexual violence, because it involves everyone affected by the crime. And it's just an opportunity to speak and listen to one another, typically structured around, topics and questions raised by a facilitator. And peacemaking circles actually has an indigenous background. That's where Native American tribes actually formed what peacemaking circles are used now, with not necessarily the goal of gaining answers, but just a form of telling your story and offering your perspective to, again, heal, provide that information exchange, and in turn, that relationship building piece. And another option of utilizing restorative justice as an alternative to the court system is victim-offender dialogue. I'm not a fan of the term that they use for this. As I mentioned, survivor is generally the term that's most preferred, but this is just the term of this particular process. So within victim-offender dialogue, it brings the survivor and the offender together with a trained facilitator in a space that's safe for all, essentially to achieve, a mutual understanding of what took place and identifying the injustice that occurred. And that meeting is a little bit more formal, with an attempt to actually reach an agreement of making things right and having that commitment for the perpetrator not to reoffend. And I would say, or not me, but what most people utilize in place of our traditional legal system is the form of conferencing. And that's a little bit more structured between survivors and offenders, and including those parties' support networks. So it allows them to come together in community. And what's different between conferencing and circles and victim offender dialogue is that it's a straightforward problem-solving approach. So it's the most comparable to a traditional justice process, but the restorative punishment, as I had mentioned, is driven by the survivor and individualized for that offender. So within the criminal justice system, I'm not sure if you all know, survivors have very little, if any, input into what justice means for them. So utilizing a restorative justice practice or approach really allows survivors to have all of the input and what they think justice means for them. Because again, justice may not mean criminal punishment. It may just mean accountability and acknowledgement of what took place, and how do we all provide a more empowering rather than traumatizing experience for our survivors to be able to achieve justice, which, as everyone, or as Bill and Brenda mentioned, is a part of their recovery process. So definitely options available out there, and I'm sure I'll be able to touch upon exact resources in our community for those survivors of sexual violence.
Thank you, Raquel. And I had a question come in specifically on your speech as you were speaking. Someone in the chat asked, are all these resources available for immigrants as well? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So mentioning again, restorative processes are outside of our criminal justice or traditional legal system. So there are forms where it's in supplement of the criminal or the court system, but most of restorative practices and the approach to achieving that justice are completely separate from the courts. So these are usually nonprofits with trained facilitators, trained volunteers who are facilitating this process. So absolutely anyone who is a survivor of sexual assault, sexual violence are eligible to receive any of the available services in their communities.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So as Nicole had kind of opened us up, we really want to get to a place now. We're at the place of asking questions, or so if you have any questions, if there are any more, put them in the chat at this time. Understanding that sometimes we don't want to be identified when we have questions in this nature, deem them to be very sensitive. If that is the case, we do want individuals to feel free to email us, and that's my office specifically. I guess you could send the email to myself, being jmcintyre@swccd.edu. And we will, if we don't have the answers for you, we will get someone to provide you with the information that you seek. So I would like to give everyone an opportunity to put a question if they have that, maybe a few minutes on that. While we are looking to see if any questions come in, I would like to ask the panel members if they could, just leaving our guests with a few words of encouragement, just in case there's someone that's in our midst that has experienced sexual violence in any form. And just a few minutes each with respect to that. And before we open that up, I do want to say thank you to Trina, Raquel, for being a part of this panel and sharing with our guests the resources that are available. And Brenda and Bill, thank you so very much for your vulnerability, your courage, and your willingness to take a very unfortunate experience in your life and turn it around through your finding empowerment and reclaiming it, even though you're still on your journeys, but helping someone else along the way. That's how we really move beyond this place as a community, as a society. So thank you so very much. We appreciate you, and words will never express how much we really appreciate your vulnerability. So with that, Raquel, if you could go ahead and continue on, and if there's something you'd like to leave someone with, whether it is resources, a word of encouragement, or whatever's on your heart to share at this time.
Sure. So I would just say is recognizing that there's power in your voice and recognizing your strengths and capabilities. Oftentimes, as was shared here, and if you're a survivor of sexual assault yourself, you tend to lose that control because of the situations that you're in. So to be able to recognize the power in your voice, and that there are folks out there willing and wanting to support you, even if it is the folks here in this room. If there's just one person that you can trust, and just get that off your chest, and that acknowledgement piece. I think acknowledging first that something occurred, something extremely powerful. So to just reach out when you feel, the need, or when you feel you're ready for that healing process, but just ultimately recognizing that there's strength in, your ability to get your voice and your power back.
Thank you, Raquel. And Nicole, I believe there was a question or two that came in.
Forgot to unmute myself. Here we go. Yes, a couple questions came in. One of them was for Raquel again. If the abuse happened in another country, will the services be available here? Can you answer to the specifics of how the resources apply in that situation?
Sure. So again, alluding back to, depending on the particular program that you are facilitating this process with, some nonprofits are only in supplement of the criminal court process, where their majority of them are standalones, just providing the restorative approach with their organization. So it really doesn't matter where the crime occurred or where that person is in the process. However, what's important to recognize, you need all parties voluntarily involved in this process for it to work. So that includes the survivor, that includes the offender, and any of your support networks. If you want, you know, the certain type of justice that's going to have an outcome base. But if you're just seeking the healing process, I would definitely recommend, you know, like the peacemaking circles, support groups, or even just things that may not require the perpetrator to be involved. However, so it really just depends on your healing process and what justice you want to pursue. And I don't want to be the one to answer that for you, but it doesn't matter essentially where you're located, where the crime occurred, just as long as you're willing and able to, you know, take part in that process, and that there's an organization available. Some are county-based, statewide, some are nationwide. So it really just depends on the type of organizations. And I can talk on two in San Diego, but I can wait until we get to that part if need be.
Thank you. Nicole?
Yeah, so another question that came in from Marquise, and this question is for Bill and or Brenda. How can we do more as a college to support others impacted by sexual violence?
I answered Marquise in the chat too, that personally, I am willing to do whatever I can to help others. Even if it's being a contact person to have a confidential conversation with as a fellow survivor. Sometimes the example we use in AA is shipwreck survivors will often bond over their shared traumatic experience. And so if there's somebody out there who wants to just have someone to talk to, I'd be willing to be a person to talk to. Being, as a campus as a whole, I think being more visible, or making the resources more visible, would be helpful, and that it's not just for students, it's for employees too.
Yeah, that's great.
I noticed Elizabeth had a similar question, and I was letting her know that for the last 5 years, I've been using the emotional freedom technique, which is commonly known as tapping. I don't know if anybody else is aware of it, but I've been using it for 5 years now, and I'm telling you, it works. It's worked for me. But I also agree with Brenda. I think that, you know, I'm willing to talk with anybody if someone needs support in that area. I think it would be nice if our counseling and our wellness center, I'm sure they do some things like this, but had like more workshops around this subject. I think would be helpful, not just in April, okay? And maybe some groups, maybe, you know, maybe some people are interested in forming groups, I don't know. But that's just my idea.
If I can piggyback off that, because actually I was going to suggest that I know at SDSU while I was a student there, they have similar in a way, I would guess to compare it to like AA, NA monthly meetings for students and faculty. If maybe that's something we want to incorporate at SWC, is having, as Bill mentioned, those support, like monthly support groups. Although, you know, we would need probably a trained facilitator to assist in that process, but maybe that's a great way of introducing like those peacemaking circles, or, you know, that don't require an outcome. It's just generally just a space, a talking piece, and a facilitator. Maybe it doesn't even need a facilitator, but just a space, a safe space where folks could come and be able to, whether it's disclosing or just continuing through that healing process. So that may be a great option to continue the conversation moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Raquel. And I would say through the consortium, we also have National University and Palomar represented, as well as SDSU and of course Southwestern. So that's a great point to make, that maybe we can continue beyond this month that we're recognizing to create a space. So thank you very much for that. And I'll remind myself to put it on the shelf so we can follow up and see if any panel members here today would be willing to assist us in that effort. So thank you. Nicole, do we have any more questions?
I didn't see any more come in, but I actually had a question that I thought of as all of you were talking. And yeah, Bill did just mention we do have a lot of Grossmont students here today. And so thank you all Grossmont students for attending as well. We appreciate having you here this afternoon. But a question I had, and any of the panelists can't answer this, but I really appreciate, you know, Brenda and Bill coming forward and speaking your truth and speaking your story. But I was wondering if you had any advice to any of the people watching out there, whether they're here in this chat currently or if they're watching the YouTube video later on, they're not ready to come forward with their story. What strategies would you give to those people that are wanting to reclaim their personal empowerment but are not quite ready to reach out to someone to talk to or seek professional help yet?
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I think that the last point that Bill made when he was sharing about the shame that can come with, you know, our bodies will feel good. That sex is supposed to feel good, and our bodies may feel good even if we don't mentally feel good about it. And that can be a huge hurdle to get over. So realizing that that's a normal response to what was happening, that you don't have to be ashamed because sometimes it felt good, that you're not going to be judged because it did feel good. That's a huge part of it. And I'm really glad that Bill brought it up, because that is a wall that will keep people from coming forward. I think almost more than anything is that it has felt good at times, in that it's perfectly normal that your body would have that response. So yeah, and then after that, find somebody you can talk to, please.
You know, also there are several, a lot of self-help books out there. You know, one that has been helpful to me is Louise Hay's Heal Your Life. That has been very helpful to me in the past. Not to promote Hay House products, but they do have a lot of good self-help books. If you're not comfortable talking to a therapist yet, you know, all I can say is you got to look within, and you got to do what's right for you, and you'll know what's right for you. I just had somebody tell me that they haven't even they told me in a private message that they haven't even been able to talk to their therapist about it. And so, but I think the right time will come. Yeah, maybe you have to have a conversation with yourself first before you can talk to your therapist, or you have to maybe rehearse that conversation you're going to have before you have it. Sometimes that helps. So, but there are a lot of books and literature out there that can be helpful as well. And hopefully you do find somebody to talk to about it eventually, hopefully.
Thanks, Bill. I know, Nicole, I believe there was a couple more that came through.
Yeah, someone asked, what advice would you give to the parents of the children? I'm guessing they're asking what advice would you give to parents of children that were abused? What advice would you give them to how they can support them after this kind of abuse has happened?
I could tell you that what I would have wanted from my parents is for my parents to be my advocate, to have somebody that would talk to me about like the restorative justice, what kind of justice do I want, someone to protect me through the whole process, and be willing to work through the hard times that a kid's gonna go through, because I know that I acted out a lot, and to help them find healthier ways to cope with what happened to them.
You know, I'll have to agree with you, Brenda. Of course, now with ACEs, we do know that it's not what's wrong with the child, it's what happened to the child.
Right.
What kind of trauma happened to the child? Why are they acting that way? Of course, my parents didn't know that, and I wish they had, because my acting out behavior up until the time I was like in 6th grade was off the charts. Mm-hmm. And teachers kept, saying, what's wrong with your child? Yeah. Instead of what happened to your child. And I think that's a paradigm shift since the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experience survey, or the study that was done here in San Diego, as a matter of fact, by Kaiser Permanente. The ACEs has changed the paradigm, I think.
Thank you, Bill. Nicole, are there any more questions?
I don't think there are any more questions in the chat.
Okay, that's fine. I know we had started off, we've just got a few more minutes. I'm sorry, Nicole, did you want to present another question?
No, I don't think so. I'm just reading another message that came in. Let me think of another question to kind of end on here. What, on a daily basis, and not just necessarily about, your abuse, but just in general, what makes you feel empowered on a daily basis? If you're having a bad day, what do you say to yourself to get yourself going again, to give yourself the energy to get through the day, whether you're having a bad day physically or emotionally, mentally? What do each of you, do on when you're having those difficult moments to help empower yourself again?
I personally I used to have a coworker that if you asked her, what are you doing? Her response was always, my best. And so I've taken that, and that's only been within the last few years, that I've taken that, and that is what I'm doing right now. I'm doing my best. And my best today might not look like what my best yesterday was, but it absolutely is the best that I can do today. And that's okay. That's exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, that's good.
I would, go ahead, Bill.
Well, for me, I have a morning routine. And I was surprised. Brenda, I know you look to that big book too. I know you do. But I have a daily routine. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. I do meditation, and then of course I do my tapping. And I do it in the morning, early. And it seems to help my day. Not to say that I don't have bad days. I have had my share. In fact, I had COVID in February. And so I counted on that a routine even when I had COVID. So, I think the way you start your day has a lot to do with the way you finish your day.
Yeah.
And I would say I actually just started implementing this recently, is just positive affirmations. I know that's my love language, so it obviously is my everything, you know, language, that just telling myself I'm capable, I'm the best person to be doing this job. If I wasn't, I wouldn't have it. You know, like just reminding myself of I'm capable, I'm worthy, I'm beautiful. It just, you know, just reminding yourself of all of the greatness about you, which is, you know, sometimes hard to do, but then once you start internalizing and remember, it's like, you know what, you're right. I am this person. I am who I don't think I am sometimes. And, you know, even my best friend was just mentioning, you know, when I was being asked to be on part of this panel, I was like, wow, like, am I the right person for this? Like, can I do this? She's like, if you weren't, they wouldn't have asked you. So then again, that just like reinforced, okay, you know what, you're right. I am capable of performing at a level I can't even imagine, you know, that there's so much more that I'm able to achieve and accomplish. So just those positive affirmations and, you know, probably staying consistent. I'm not probably really good at that, but staying consistent in that. So then I can, again, internalize that and not have to have those moments of inconsistencies or, you know, just doubtful feelings.
Trina?
Yeah. No, I too, positive affirmations have been really powerful myself, and William, I also tap. That grounds me, you know, and has been a game changer for myself. But I did want to say something too, you know, Janene, when you were saying any message for those folks out there considering resources. I wanted to say that, you know, as a service provider, we acknowledge that a lot of sexual violence comes from folks who were supposed to protect and who were supposed to have your trust. And because of that, we know how hard it is then to trust and believe in resources, that there are actually folks who have your best interest at heart. And so I would like to say that for anyone that comes to get my services, as well as colleague services throughout the county, we admire your bravery. We admire your bravery. So, you know, consider taking that risk to reach out.
Great, thank you, Trina. Thank you, and on that note, thanks for yes, Bill?
I see a question from Heidi.
Yeah, yeah, that came in. It's a great question.
Give to your young self. I wish I could have said something. I wish I could have said stop, or I could have told my parents, but I didn't want to hurt anybody. And I thought I would hurt people, and I'd hurt myself. But here's the thing. We can train our own children to speak up. We can tell them that, you know, their body belongs to them and not to anybody else, and not let people touch parts of you that are covered by your bathing suit. You know, I think we can do that early on, very early on. I'm talking like preschool age. We need to let children know that, give them that message. That's all I have to say here.
I think my answer would be just, you're worth it. I think I would tell my younger self, you're worth it.
That's powerful. Thank you both. I don't know if did everyone answer the question that was presented earlier about some words of encouragement, of truth that you would like to leave with the group and those that may be listening now or will be listening to this later? Did everyone get to speak to that? That want to?
I think they all did. I think they all did, Janene. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
But yeah, I have a nice comment from Ursula Williams in the chat, says, you are worth it. You are enough. That is so true. Those are strong words. And I think everyone needs to remember that every day. And it's powerful words to live by, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. As we close, thank you again, panelists. Thank you so much for your rawness and your openness and your heart. There was a quote that was in the chat that was so wonderful about vulnerability is the most pure pleasure to one's heart, allowing them to be vulnerable. I may be misquoting that, but it really spoke to the moment. And each of you, Brenda and Bill, really coming forward and speaking your truth has been, it's been a blessing to us all. And Trina and Raquel, thank you so very much for your contributions. And absolutely, Raquel, we would not have asked you here as well as everyone else if we didn't find value in you and what you bring. So thank you both, Trina and Raquel, for doing so. I would also like to thank Nicole Holton. This is our last Zoom session for our Sexual Assault Awareness Month recognition. She has spearheaded this, pulling things together, really herding cats throughout this month. We also want to mention to everyone, there's one last event. It will be a movie showing, Roll Red Roll, and it will be on Southwestern College's campus. There's information on the website. If you are associated with any of the consortium members, there's been a litany of information disseminated therefrom. If you're a Grossmont affiliate, we will make sure Professor gets the information and he can share that information. It will be held tomorrow and at Southwestern College. And starting time is what, dusk on that roughly, Nicole?
Yeah, we're planning on starting around 7:30. I just put the link to the registration page in the chat. I also want to mention we will be providing free refreshments to the first 50 people that arrive. So, so we encourage people to sign up. It's going to be a great movie. It's about what we're all talking about this month, sexual assault awareness, especially with, you know, in this particular high school in Ohio, there is an incident that occurred and what happened from it. And it's a really eye-opening story, and luckily it ended with a good result. So I think it's an uplifting story as well. So it's about bringing back justice and all the things we talked about today. So I encourage everyone to show up for that.
Thank you so very much, Nicole, for that. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate all your support, and I hope that this session has been beneficial to you and maybe someone also that you know. We will be sending out a survey. We would greatly appreciate if you complete it and provide it back so that it can assist us as we provide more programming to help those that are in need. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and God bless.